Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I am Liz Munsell, the MFA's Lorraine and Alan Bressler Curator of Contemporary Art. I am one part of a curatorial team at the Museum of Fine Arts, which includes Michelle Mar Fisher, Reto Turing, and Achille Tomasino, who all work to launch the online archival project Black Power in Print on October 15th, which was the 55th anniversary of the founding of the Black Panther Party for self-defense. This project, including our related program tonight that you are so generously joining, is supported by Bridget and Bruce Evans. Our program is going to run for about 60 minutes tonight. I'm going to now give some background and an introduction to the incredible panelists that we have this evening. Dana C. Chandler Jr., Professor Margaret A. Burnham, and Douglas Miranda. And after my introduction, we're going to hear from the three of them for about 35 minutes. We'll try to stick to times. We have a lot of content to cover tonight. In the last 10 minutes or so, we hope that we can hear from you as well. So please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A throughout our conversation, and we will field as many of them as we can at the end. So for a bit of context, Black Power in Print is a largely online project that examines the Black Power movement's legacy in visual culture and its resonance today through interviews with future generations of artists and curators, as well as oral histories with some of the amazing folks on the screen. It's the outgrowth of a collaboration that the Museum of Fine Arts had with MoMA in New York, beginning in 2020. It provides unprecedented access to MoMA's newly digitalized collection of Black Panther newspapers. And on the MFA webpage, it has newly digitalized images from the Chandler Family Archive and from Northeastern University libraries, archives, and special collections. It includes an oral history with Professor Chandler and his daughter and advocate, Dana Chandler, an interview with Dr. Kelly Morgan, conducted by ICA curatorial fellow Chenoa Baker, and an interview with artist Bushra Khalili by scholar Jackie Wang. This project really came out of wanting to provide direct access to these documents, the historic documents, but also reflections on them and providing that access to you all. So we will put a link in the chat and make sure that you can find it and share it following this program. So we are honored to be joined tonight by Douglas Miranda, Professor Margaret A. Burnham, and Professor Dana C. Chandler, all of whom were on the front lines of the Black Power movement in the late 60s and 70s, and really up until now, because this movement, I would argue, still manifests today in so many different ways. In spring 1970, activists gathered in Post Office Square, as you can see in the image to the right, to protest the trial of Black Panther National Chairman Bobby Seale. Crowd was met with speeches by Doug Miranda, who's joining us tonight, then the area captain, and Artie Seale, Bobby Seale's then wife. Doug was and is a pivotal leader, and he was a crucial member of the party working throughout New England. He will certainly tell us more this evening. Simultaneous to this moment, just 30 days later, Dana exhibited this painting, a portrait of Bobby Seale at the MFA in the exhibition Afro-American Artists, New York and Boston, utilizing his platform as an artist exhibiting in a very white institution to exercise his voice in support of the Panthers. This same year, for her part in 1970, our esteemed moderator this evening, Professor Burnham, was serving as Angela Davis's defense attorney. Today, Professor Burnham is the Distinguished Professor of Law at Northeastern University and Director of the Civil Rights and Restorative Justice Project which focuses on unresolved racially based homicides in the Deep South from 1930 to 1970. From 1969 to 1972, she worked for the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund in New York City. In 1977, she became the first African-American woman to serve in the Massachusetts judiciary, and she joined the Boston Municipal Court bench as an associate justice, serving there until 1982. She has been part of the Carnegie Fellows program. She's been a Du Bois Fellow, a Radcliffe Fellow, and so much more could be said about her accomplishments in the arena of civil rights and human rights. But I'll conclude now with how in June of this year, President Joe Biden nominated Professor Burnham to serve on the Civil Rights Cold Case Records Review Board. Her book, By Hands Known, Jim Crow's Legal Executioners, will be published in 2022. Dana Chandler was born in Lynn, Massachusetts, and grew up in Roxbury in Boston. He attended Boston public schools and frequently visited the MFA as a child. In 1967, he witnessed Boston police using violence to stop a peaceful civil rights protest, an event that triggered his commitment to the Black Power movement. In the late 60s and 70s, he led and participated in protests against the MFA due to its lack of representation of Black artists. And that advocacy is something he did really all over town, leading to the creation in the mid to late 70s of the African American Masters in Residency program at Northeastern, a studio and community and exhibition space that is still active today. Chandler has exhibited around the world, so I'm going to encourage you to visit his website, celebratedactivistartist.com, for more. But I'll just note that in 2018, he was the Mass Art Alumni Award recipient, and he will be receiving an honorary doctoral degree from Simmons University, where he taught for a number of decades, in May. Dana is pictured here in Time magazine in April 6, 1970, which was published actually the day before that rally we saw in Post Office Square. He's here with his painting, Fred Hampton's Door, which he created as a mode of channeling his rage regarding the murder of yet another gifted and charismatic young Black leader. He made this painting in early 1970. And shortly thereafter, as a student, he wrote to the MFA demanding increased representation of the Black community and artists that were really at the MFA's doorsteps. Together with the efforts of Alma Lewis, who had recently founded the Museum of the National Center for Afro-American Artists, bringing on Barry Gaither as curator and director, and he also became a special consultant to the MFA. Really working together with them, their efforts combined, this led to the 1970 exhibition Afro-American Artists New York and Boston, which took place at the Museum of Fine Arts, the NCAAA, and also the School of the Museum of Fine Arts in spring 1970, curated by Barry Gaither. The letter was lost in MFA archives for decades. It was misfiled. Our archivist and MFA historian Maureen Melton writes about this on the webpage we made for Black Power in Print. It was finally recovered in April 2021, this year, on Dana's 80th birthday. And we have published both the letter and the subsequent correspondence available for download on the Black Power in Print webpage. Chandler signed this correspondence with the words, "Yours and Black Art Power," which I know has inspired some of future generations, and I hope will continue to, in their email signatures. You know who you are, Chenoa Baker. And Chandler created this sculpture, Fred Hampton's Door 2, which is now on view in a physical gallery at the MFA, following the theft of the small-scale version of the painting. He often says that his work was destroyed or stolen more than it's been collected by institutions. So he decided to make this second version of the sculpture on an actual door to ensure that the new version could not be easily stolen. Both versions commemorate Hampton for his vast contributions while protesting and mourning the violent circumstances of his death, particularly because their surfaces are permeated with real bullet holes. It's a very visceral experience of an artwork, and I encourage you to come to the MFA to see it in person. Though the first version of this painting was exhibited at the MFA in 1970, it was not until December 2020, 50 years following the display of the original work, that a major work by Chandler finally entered the MFA collection. Professor Chandler joins us today from his home and studio in New Mexico. He's set within a space that is reminiscent of his more recent installation-based work. We are very honored for his presence and the presence of all the panelists. And with that, I pass it off to Professor Margaret Burnham. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Liz. You and your colleagues have our deep gratitude for bringing back to Boston Dana and for launching this exhibition and this program. It is for me a deep honor to be in the presence of these two gentlemen, these two sons of Boston, and we are all in for a true treat. Dana and Doug came to full political maturity and engagement around the same time right here in Boston. As Dana tells it, he was always an artist. There's a wonderful oral history of Dana interviewed by Liz on the website, and I urge you all to listen to it. But he talks about how he became an artist in kindergarten and then followed that with his visits as a boy to the galleries here at the MFA. But Dana's growth as a political artist was greatly influenced by the Black Power movements of the late 1960s and the early 1970s here in Boston and around the country, and more specifically by the launch and work of the Black Power, Black Panther Party. It was in that context that he became a central figure in Boston's arts community and an important supporter of the party. The party at that point was, as Liz said, led by Doug Miranda, and Doug and Dana. They grew together, they struggled together, they fought for folks here in Boston and fought for the liberation principles of the party together. And so here they are together again, 50 years hence. And so I'll start this conversation as an outsider to the world of art, but not an outsider to the world of political engagement. I'll start with Doug and ask you, Doug, if you can share with us how you came to meet Dana.
Well, back in 1968, I had met Kathleen Cleaver, and after a lengthy conversation with her, I decided to come back to Boston and join the Panther Party. I came back in September of 1968, I joined the party. And through my work with the party, I met Dana and became very impressed with what Dana was doing, not only on the art scene, but in terms of the politics of the Black community and the politics of the city of Boston. And for a moment, I just want to thank Dana for not, for not shutting up and just painting. That Dana was someone who was very bold in the way he expressed himself, and someone who understood that in order to make change in the city, you had to rattle or bang at the doors of the institutions of the city. And by writing that letter to the Museum of Fine Arts, he did just that. And it's in that context that I would run into Dana at meetings, at rallies. There were a lot of things going on in the city then. Rallies and demonstrations against the Vietnam War, rallies and demonstrations by different political organizations like the Black Panther Party, SNCC, the Welfare Mothers Rights Group was protesting. They had led a demonstration in 1967 in Grove Hall at the welfare office. But it was in that context that I met Dana and immediately became very impressed again with his forthrightness. He wasn't afraid to say what he was feeling, and he was a natural leader, in the movement.
So thank you, Doug. So Dana, turning to you for a moment, both Liz and Doug have referenced the famous protest that you made to the MFA because it was ignoring African-American artists such as yourself. And in the manifesto that is now in the chat that you wrote to the then director of the MFA, Perry Rathbone, you insisted that the MFA recognize the work that was produced by artists like yourself. Dana, at the same time, you took the position that the principal role of the Black artist was to speak to and for Black people, to produce socially engaged art. Were these two perspectives in any way contradictory, seeking to knock on the door or demand that the door be opened for artists at the MFA and producing socially engaged art that could educate and reflect the spirit, feelings, and desires and power of African Americans?
I don't see them as being contradictory at all, primarily because I see our role as a people as the defenders of our history and our people, especially, of course, our women and children. And I thought then, as I think now, that we were an equal partner here in America to, how do I express this, to make America see us as a real people and to treat us a lot better than they had been treating us in the past and as they are treating us now, because the things that they were doing to us as a people back at that time, they are still doing to us. And I think that it gets very, very tiring to be their excuse to blame the victim for all of their maladies and problems and whatever else is going on in their lives. And well, actually, that's pretty much how I was feeling. So I was a very angry person. And also my later prolificness in terms of the works that I was doing was because I was afraid that I would be like a Fred Hampton and I would be murdered out of hand, because we were being murdered out of hand at that time. And that has never ceased. I was looking at some videos last night on YouTube. Whoever invented YouTube, thank you very much, because we can now see ourselves being murdered. I mean, just right there, we can see the police officers draw their guns and shoot us dead, and just do it because they can. And that has always bothered us. Plus, so many of us are fine intellectual people, and I thought that that ought to be recognized as well. We should not be seen as anything else than equal to everybody else in this world. And I wasn't getting that from the Museum of Fine Arts or any kind of white institution, including the one that I taught at.
So Dana, you mentioned you referenced George Floyd and all the other Black bodies that have lain prone at the hands of police today. And certainly that drove your art in when you did Fred Hampton's Door #1 and #2. What has driven your art over these decades since then? Why do you create what you do create, Dana?
Because I'm still, quite frankly, very furious at the way that America treats us. I mean, the idea that there would be a Floyd and so many others, particularly that young woman whose name I can't remember. Donna, help me, please. Who got killed. She was up working in the medical industry, and I think she was a nurse, and she got killed, blown away after the police came and started shooting up her apartment.
Mhm.
I can't remember her name. Maybe someone else does.
Breonna
But
Taylor.
thank you. That is exactly who. You see why I have my daughter around? I think of her as the other half of my brain most of the time.
Uh-huh.
And she's real good at it too, believe me. But the kind of things that have been and are happening to me still, because I think of myself as being black, you might have noticed that, um, still just infuriate me. Why should these kind of things happen to me and to Doug and to Margaret and to Donna? We are the best of America. I'm just being blunt. We are the smartest people in America, especially now. I mean, look what our kids are doing. It's just so amazing. And they are wonderful. But something happens to them in America. All the brilliant things you see going on right now are being stolen from us by Europeans who are making tremendous amounts of money that doesn't go back to us. What's up with that? You don't have that right. And I don't appreciate it. And I ain't gonna pretend that I do. So that's what keeps me going.
So has your art changed in any way? It's been 50 years, so obviously it has. But if you were talking to a young person about the trajectory of your career as an engaged social artist with a commitment to liberation politics, how would you say it's affected what you've produced?
It has, I think it's really expanded my idea of what it is I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to speak truth to power 24/7, 365 days a year, and never cease and never stop any more than you do, Margaret, in the work that you do, which is extraordinary. And this gives me an opportunity to say something about you, Margaret. We had back in those days, we had Elma Lewis, we had Ellen Jackson, we had Ruth Batson, we had especially Melnea Cass, you may remember those people. And that's what you've become. I think that's just wonderful. And I'm loving it. And so has my daughter.
Well, thank you.
We are the ones. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I said thank you, Dana, but this is about you. This is your night, not mine. But thank you. I appreciate it.
It's our night. It's our night.
Good, Margaret. With that in mind, Dana.
Yes.
Why the Museum of Fine Arts? Why did you feel it was important to focus people's attention on the Museum of Fine Arts in that time in terms of what they were doing and weren't doing in relation to the Black community here in Boston?
Oh, for crying out loud. Sometimes I feel like throwing these phones away like that. The Museum of Fine Arts has, for all of its existence, been right across the street from the Black community. It takes exactly 5 minutes to walk from the museum straight into the Black community. How dare they not have our artwork? How dare they not show our paintings and the things that we create? Who the hell do they think they are? They also take our money for all the programs and things. And it's been very tough for the people in the museum who've been our allies to put us in a position where we can have a show like the one that's being on exhibition now. And I'm just not about to ever not say to the museum, you need to do a better job, while thanking all of the allies that we have there who are working on doing exactly that, which is something that Margaret talked to me about very recently in terms of her going back and forth to the museum and visiting all the allies that we have at the museum. And also that my daughter has been saying something to me for more than a decade. She has been saying the following words: Dad, our generation, we got this. we got. So we're not going to allow them to do any of the kind of things they used to do to us. And they've kept their words. I mean, just look at what our young people are doing today. I am so proud of our young people. I don't know what to do with them. Sometimes I sit here, look at some of the stuff you guys are doing and cry like a baby. Thank you. I am so appreciative of you. But anyway, to get back to the museum, what the hell are they doing right across the street from us and not showing who we are and what we do? Donna,
Dana,
did you want to say? Oh, Margaret.
Dana, I just wanted so you put it sharply today as you did back then in 1970, and you also referenced the work that is being produced by today's artists, of which you are one, but artists who are coming into their full expression today. You worked in the midst of what's known as the Black Arts movement in the 1970s. Is there any parallel movement today to which young artists, with which young artists are associated, or obviously it's a different time? What would you say you got from working with, artists, not just visual artists, but dancers and filmmakers and musicians and writers in the Black Arts movement? And how does that compare with where we are culturally today?
We are so much better off than we ever used to be. These kids are brilliant. They're doing the most marvelous kind of stuff, and they are doing everything you can possibly think of. So I can't pick a group and say, that's the group that's influencing me today. Our dancers, our writers, our poets, and plus it's everybody. It isn't just Black males or Black females. It's whatever the spectrum is. They are busy working to make sure that the world that they live in is the world that they should have been living in way back when I was doing my work. So I can't pick any one group, but boy, do we have some great young Black artists. And I would suggest that you all look us up, because we're all over things like YouTube, and I can't name some of the organizations. I can't remember those people's names. Twitter. What are the other ones, Donna?
Twitter, Facebook, even LinkedIn. So those are the major platforms, but there are others like Snapchat, TikTok. There are just a number of them now.
Also, Dana, they're all standing on your shoulders, that's for sure. But let me take us back just for a moment. Let me take us back to the 1970s. This exhibition celebrates your work and your protest and what's come of it. But it's also we're also marking the launch of the Black Panther Party and the work of Emory Douglas, who was, of course, the Minister of Culture of the party and who was responsible for the famous iconography in the newspaper, those images of the exaggerated Panther warriors and the grotesque police officers who were depicted as pigs, that famous black fist, which we see in the other piece of your work that's at the MFA, and we see in all of the BLM posters nowadays. So were you influenced or inspired in any way by Emory Douglas's work?
I can't say that I was inspired by any specific artist at that time, but I was, what's the other word that you use? It wasn't inspired.
Inspired by.
Okay, well, I'll use that one too. But I was thrilled by his work. Every time that newspaper came out, I would dance across the street because I was so thrilled by it. And also Muhammad Speaks, that newspaper, because here we were firmly allowing ourselves to speak truth to power in the most eloquent way that we could, with some of the best visuals that were ever seen. One of the things that the exhibition did that came in 1970 was it proved to anybody who ever had any doubts that our art was as good as anybody's art and was on a level of intellectualism that we were not expected to be privy to. And it reminded people that we were privy to everything. Anything that anybody else could do in the world, we could do. If we could just get those creatures, like our former pink president, out the way. We could do anything at any time, and we did.
Right.
You know,
So Dana, setting aside for a moment, I'm sorry, Dana, setting aside for a moment, the pink president, could you tell us a little bit, Dana, about your current work? What's moving you nowadays? The anger is still there. It must be expressing itself in different ways. What are you working on nowadays? Is it still murals? Is it tell us about what you're working on today.
It's mostly reprographics, which is collages. And that work these days is really my way of speaking to the great physical beauty of African women, because not only of their great beauty and their great intellect, which is obviously present right here, but also the fact that they were the most abused and the least protected women in the history of this country. That position has been taken over by Native American women. It's not a great thing to even think about, but what happened to our women is something that needs to be a very vocal part of our history. And thank you now is because of the women who are coming forward and allowing everybody to know that they did not want the attention of the colonialist men who were doing terrible physical things to them. So I'm dealing with that whole concept. And I'm also dealing with the idea of, as you take a look at what's behind me, of all of the things that we do as Americans, joining in with our detractors, that is hurting and abusive to the world, because these people in this tribe, this single tribe of Europeans, have destroyed God's Eden. We have to be clear that we're born into Eden and then we mess it up. So I'm very disturbed by global
warming.
Thank you. I'll take all the help I can get. Thank you. I'm very disturbed by that because we are born into Eden and then we turn around and destroy it. And some of us are helping these very people do that. So here's what I would say out loud, and I hope that you will think about what I said instead of getting angry about what I'm about to say. Is it clear to you that the tribe that's destroying the world today is the only tribe of humans that if they all disappeared, I didn't say die, I said disappeared tomorrow, nobody would miss them? Think about that. Nobody would miss them because of their pollution of the air, the water, plants, and everything else. You all have got to stop doing this, destroying the world that you're born into. I will keep repeating, this is already Eden. God took care of everything for us. We need to stop messing it up. Besides, I'm tired of global, whatever it is, killing our people. We've got to stop doing that. So that's what I'm dealing with now.
So Dana, thanks so much. Thanks so much for that. I know there are some folks in the audience who want to jump in here, but I did want to give Doug, I think you were about to say.
I just wanted to say, yes, thank you, Margaret. I just wanted to say that Dana and Emory Douglas, who was a contemporary of Dana, I think took art, especially Black art at that time, in a very radical and revolutionary direction. I think it created the space for a lot of young artists that came after them, especially muralists, to begin to express themselves in ways that Black artists weren't allowed to express themselves, but wanted to express themselves. You know, Emery was, you know, if you could say, I think you could say this about Dana and Emery's work, that if in the old days, you know, like a picture was worth 1,000 words, the art of Emery and Dana were worth millions and millions of words. You know, it gave a reflection of the Black community and spoke back, you know, to the Black community in ways that artists were afraid to do in the past. And folks like Emery and folks like Dana did it without fear of repercussions. They didn't care what the consequences were. This direction needed to be headed in, and the Black artists need to say what was important to say, not just about what they were doing, but what was happening in the Black community and what direction politically should the Black community, you know, move in or move towards.
Doug, back in those days, I was at the school, the Massachusetts College of Art, and I had a number of professors who were furious at me about the kind of work that I was doing. I remember one in particular who said to me, "Why do you want to be a Black artist? Why don't you just want to be an artist?" And I lifted up my hand and I pointed at my skin. I said, "What's wrong with you? Are you blind?" You know, and when they would say to me, "Don't paint that," I would say to them, "Why shouldn't I paint that? I don't need to be like you. We need to talk about what's happening to my people. And I'm going to talk about that for the rest of my life if I please. I am not going to be a white artist, so forget it." You know, and I felt that way in terms of all the other artists because they were all over the country at that time doing the kind of work that I was doing. You know, my mind doesn't allow me to remember names as much as I used to, but there were literally hundreds of artists who also never, like me, never got the recognition for doing that kind of work in our communities. And it's lovely to start to get the recognition for the work that we've done. But my prayer is that people will start buying the art so that you can have a legacy of your own people's work on the world, on your walls. So
Right.
many of us still go to hang in there for a minute, Margaret. So many of us still go to the big box stores and buy everybody else's art and not our own and hang them on the wall. That's why I'm enjoying your space and my space together, because we don't do that. And more of us have to not do that. We need to buy the work of the artists and hang the work up on the wall, because guess what? We have electrical bills too. We have all kinds of bills and we need to pay those bills. So please stop complimenting me all the time. Buy some work. And by the way, the person that you buy it through is sitting there looking you in the face right now.
So
Yes,
Donna,
I am going to do that.
Donna is going to hang around and take your checks. And
absolutely.
Dana is really pointing out again this contradiction between, you know, Black artists who are producing the work and who are saying artwork is more than a commodity. But even though it's more than a commodity, we're producing work for the public. We're producing, you know, public work intended to educate the public. It nevertheless should be bought and supported, and that's been a fairly consistent theme in
you can say that again, Margaret.
Black artists, yeah. But let me just remind our viewers of, you know, Dana as a muralist as well. I remember in Boston, the mural that Dana produced. I think that it was "Stay in School and Educate Yourself." Was the mural that
knowledge is power. Stay in school.
Knowledge is power. Stay in school, and that was just so powerful and prophetic and influential at the time, and also obviously as Doug said, connected the artistic community, or arts community, Black arts community in Boston with what was going on really around the country on the muralist side, that, you know, people were making art that it had, you know, there had to be certain features to it. It had to be understandable. It had to be educative. It had to be humanistic. It had to identify a problem and perhaps suggest a solution. All of these were features of the art that Black African-American artists took on as they engaged with the politics of the moment. The revolution being, we thought, around the corner at that point. We were misinformed in that respect, but nevertheless, taking all of this on, and also, as Dana says, trying to make a living, trying to be a, you know, competent, fully professional, fully engaged artist, while supporting other artists, as Dana famously did in this city, starting AMARP and opening that up to the community. So I've actually think our time has really come. There are, as I said, a lot of folks in our audience who likely want to engage with Dana and with Doug, and now is the time for that. If there are questions, I know that everyone's been in a bit of a listening mode for the last half an hour or so, but now we want to be an engaged moment. And so if you have questions, and I know you do, or comments, I would invite you to throw them in the chat, and we'll go from there. Brian McFarlane asks, what became of the many artists who grew from their association with AMARP over the last 45 years? And Brian further asks, Brian, that is the artist, famous Brian McFarlane, the artist, asks, do you feel intrinsic connections to the artists whose lives and work you were so important to? And what are your thoughts about the growth? There are three questions here, not one. Try to make it one question, folks. What are your thoughts on the growth which sprung from the inspiration and platform that you provided for these artists? I assume Brian was one of these artists. Dana,
Yes,
Brian,
he was.
Brian is in the house, Dana.
Well, I just wanted him to remember how proud I used to be of him and his work, and the things that he had done and the things that he's accomplished in his life. I feel very connected to you all. You may not exactly appreciate it the way I feel about you all, but you were like my children to me, you know. Now, I bear in mind that some of you is mature and similar to my age, but I was just trying to make sure you had a space where you could create your work. And so many of you did so much of that. You did such great pieces of work, which is my way of saying to the public, you need to look up that name and look at this young man's work. The man's good, okay? So his work needs to be purchased too. I'm really speaking to all of those artists in terms of that. They were wonderful. I enjoyed my interaction with them. And I really did keep to my word, which was, I'm giving you this space, go do your work. You know, and I also tried to say, listen, don't involve yourself so much in the political situation all around you. Do the work, because we need your work to be part of our legacy. And every now and again, I would say that to Brian because he is very politically minded, and he would always have something to say about everything. And I appreciated that.
I know Dana not only supported artists and the artists in their community here in Boston, but also folks like Barry Gaither, who started the museum in 1970 after Dana opened the door at the MFA and pushed the MFA to do more. Barry, of course, then became associated with the MFA and began to build our collection at the National Center of African American Artists. And he's not able to be here today, but asked me to publicly acknowledge the important role that Dana played in his own development and history. So
Let me just say something, because she as commenting on one of our most brilliant African Americans alive today in terms of the art, which is Edmund Barry Gaither, who I have never felt that the museum gave proper, what's the word I'm looking for, credit to, for all of the fantastic things that he did. If it wasn't for him, a whole lot of Black art from around the world would never have seen the light of day in Boston. And, you know, I don't know what kind of things he has that he's interested in doing, but I wish the Museum of Art would support him better. I am really pissed off about that one.
Dana, here's a terrific question from Asta Sin to you. You discussed the new generation of artists and their all the work that they're producing and its connection, obviously, with the earlier generations. What role does technology play in the work that they're doing today? Do you think it has helped or advanced their work? What are your views about the use of the broad use of technology in the production of art today?
For all of those so-called critics who get upset when artists use technology, mind your damn business. These young people know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. And if technology will allow them to get their story across, get out the way and let them do what they're going to do. Because this technology, what would our life be like if it wasn't for YouTube right now, in terms of telling that kind of story? What would our life be like if it wasn't for Twitter and all of those kind of technically based technology? We are so lucky, and I'm so tickled by whoever invented YouTube and the iPhone and all of that kind of stuff, because you really cut the throats of the racists in the country. They can't get away with anything now. Thank you, Jesus. And yes, I did say Jesus. So I'm very thrilled about that, and I hope that it expands and grows. I'm sorry, I get very emotional about this because we were dead in the water as a people because we didn't have the technology to allow the world to see how badly we were treated. And I'm so thrilled by all of our allies now, like Liz and some others, who are using that technology to present the truth to the world. You racists can't hide now. We see you, and we're out after you. You're not going to do to us what you used to do to us anymore. So I'm thrilled by technology. I really am. And
Dana, do you use it in your own work?
Yes, I do what's called reprographics. As a matter of fact, I have 10 pieces I'm bringing to the people who do enlarge the reprographics to the sizes that I would like them to be. I mean, I can't explain it technically because my brain is not working like that since my medical challenge. But my daughter is the one who can explain all of that to you, and she can explain it clearly. She is one of the smartest human beings I know. And that's just true. If you don't believe me, make the mistake of trying her and see where it gets you. So
fruit didn't fall far from the tree here. Donna, would you like to add something on your father's use of technology in his current art practice?
What he's doing is he's having some of his smaller pieces enlarged and to various sizes with a goal of enlarging them to the size of a billboard so people can see and feel the art in real ways that is not possible in the smaller pieces. They can virtually walk into the pieces is the goal. So he's having his connection at the UPF store, frankly, enlarge the pieces, and then he frames them. I did share a link to that in the chat. I think it was this first or second link. Let me look really quickly.
Thank you.
It's what Professor Chandler is working on today. So you can go and see it there.
Would you tell them what the website that you created is, please?
It is celebratedactivistartist.com.
You need to go and see it. You want to talk about youthful brilliance? Go take a look at that website. Plus, she can write. You know, there are people who write, and then there are people who write, and she can write, you know, sort of like Margaret.
Dana, I got another bunch of questions for you. The audience is eager to hear from you. And some of these questions speak to the whole issue of political expression, artistic expression and political expression, and where the two meet. So whether art has to be overtly political, overtly address social injustice to be political. And also this question, whether you think all artists who are Black should involve themselves in activism, is that optional or mandatory, is a question from one of our audience members.
Well, when I was much younger, the age that Doug and I were back in those days, when we were back then or there and pretty, I of course thought that it was not optional. I really did. I thought that every African-American artist must create imagery which speaks to our challenges in America. Now I think that we should all do everything we damn well please. You know, go for everything, you young artists out there. Don't let anybody hinder you or tell you what to do. Ignore them, because that's the only way you're going to create a body of work that truly represents you. And your viewpoint is very important. I think about the fact that someone I first met when she was 16, and I hope I pronounced your first name correct, Aqua. Aqua has a show at the Museum of Fine Arts. Wow, I danced across the street when I saw that. Even though I couldn't really dance across the street, I was so thrilled for her. Her work is fabulous. Why don't you own some of it? And I mean that very seriously. Stop buying your art from stores like I can't even think of the name of the stores, like Kohl's or, you know, the big box stores. What's the one that's so famous these days?
We get you, Dana.
Okay, well, I'm very glad. Thank you, Margaret. You know, buy some real art from a real live person. You know, if you can't get their real art, get their prints, but get something. Why don't you have stuff on your walls for your kids to see? How are they going to learn about this stuff if you don't help to teach them? There you are.
Dana, as far as your role in participating in a major way in the National Conference of Artists, Brian again wants to remind everyone and to say to you specifically how important a platform that was for artists nationally and internationally. I don't think that's as much a question as it is a comment, and sending some more roses your way, Dana, for those of us
Thank you for that.
who are still in this city.
Can I say something real quick?
Yes, please do, Dana.
Listen, Northeastern University, stop trying to get rid of us. You're really pissing me off behind this. We have all these magnificent artists that are nationally famous sitting right on your campus doing brilliant work, and you're trying to throw us out because you want to do business as usual. I don't care whether you think you are a white nationalist institution. You're not. You don't get the right to be that way and do the kinds of things that you're doing to us right now. You need to take time and meet with these folks and see how really great and how fortunate you are to have them there. Cut out the foolishness, people.
Okay, so thank you. That message was certainly in Dana's style, loud, clear, and direct. And I'm sure those who have the authority or power or influence to do something about that situation have heard and will take heed.
I hope so.
Yes, absolutely. So again, and finally, there's one final question here, Dana, which has to do with your time at Simmons when you were working there as a professor And of course, Simmons is at the, maybe still is a women's college.
It
And,
is, and it's Simmons University, my
Simmons
dear.
University, yes.
Isn't
yes,
that wonderful?
stand corrected.
I
Simmons
love teaching there. I really do. I love teaching at Simmons. I met so many brilliant young women of every color you can think of who ended up being really, I mean, just magnificent for the world, you know? And it was fun because almost all of them were like my daughter, smarter than me. And they were not, how do I put this? They were not unwilling to let me know how smart they were. And I loved that fact. And Donna, by the way, was one of my students and came in and had to tell them this when they said to her, "You're going to get away with everything." And she told them, "I'm not going to get away with nothing." What did you tell them? Donna, what did you tell them?
I asked them what they thought it might be like to have him as my father and acting as a professor at every opportunity he got. I got away with nothing, even through all of my schooling. And I told him he was going to be harder on me than he will be on any of you because he has higher expectations of me because of that. So I will be getting away with nothing. I will work as hard or harder than any of you in this classroom.
Yeah, that's pretty much the same thing that Gail told them. That's my sister, very, very brilliant young woman who was in my class, and she worked a lot in the legal profession, and she was usually smarter than the lawyers that she worked with. Just a brilliant woman.
So, thank you, Donna, and thank you, Dana. And we've hit the mark here. It is just about 7 o'clock. Before we leave, I do want to remind all of our audience members about the links in the chat. There's a link to the AMARP issue that Professor Chandler just raised. There's a link as well to Equa Holmes's current exhibition at the MFA. And there's a link as well to that Donna Chandler has put in the chat to Professor Chandler's recent work and to a way to get in touch with her if you have further interest and questions in that. This has been a truly, truly remarkable and, dare I say, historical discussion. And thanks so much to Liz and her colleagues for making it happen. And particular thanks and much thanks and much love to Dana, to our brother Dana, for all he has done for artists really across our country, but particularly for those of us who live in this town and have lived here for many years, for starting us off here in Boston and for all that he did. Not only to develop his own practice, but also to launch the practice of so many well-known and productive and important artists in our city. Thank you so much, Professor Chandler. And thank you as well, Doug Miranda.
Thank you, Dana.
Thank you everyone for joining us. Have a special shout out to Donna. I'm sorry I didn't introduce you at the beginning. I'm so glad that you could join because your support of your dad and all of the information that you've put out there is so key for us being able to access and cherish and uphold this legacy moving forward. Thank you so much, Doug and Dana and Professor Burnham, for your incredible moderation. And we look forward to getting this talk up online in short order so it can be accessed by many more people. Thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you so much. Take care all.
I just want to say to my children and grandchildren, I love you.
Love you, Dana. We're all your children and grandchildren. We love you too.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Take care all.
Good night, all.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks,
Thank
Doug.
you, Dana.
Thanks, baby.